Okay. Good
Okay.
day, everyone. And how you all
Good
doing
day.
today? Yes, please. And today is a great day. I'm joined with Shegun Akiade. I'll say that this man needs no introduction, but I'm just going to do a short introduction of this man. I'm not saying this in a personal level because, so Shegun, please allow me. Um, the reason why I'm doing this is
Okay.
because it's necessary for me to be able to introduce my guest. Shagun is one of the few people that I can say a guru, a specialist when it comes to compensation and benefit reward. And
Mm.
in terms of training, he's a born teacher. If you don't know, he's a born teacher. And when it comes to total reward strategy, Shagun is one of those people I think you can call on. And Shagun has worked in a global space and he has that global experience when it comes to job evaluation, job design, total reward strategy, organizational restructuring, and HR advisory and consulting. He has developed a reputation for himself, delivering impactful and strategic human resources interventions that drives organizational transformation. It is one thing for you to do a strategy or impact or transformation, but you're supposed to drive that transformation within the organization. Second, has excelled in his craft and executing effective reward strategy and benefit program. He combines strong analytical skills with a deep understanding of global regulatory compliance to optimize HR operations and enhance employee satisfaction. Sheldon extensive industry expertise span financial services, banking, asset management, insurance, pension fund administration, and fintech. And fast moving consumer is what we call FMCG. I will pause on that because if I continue, I'm not sure we'll start this conversation. So it's easier for me to say all these things because one, I can say that it's a privilege for me to be able to have worked with Chegun one way or the other. Either we volunteer together somewhere, privileged to say, well, like, can you do this? I said, sure, I jumped on it, which I think has also enhanced my career over the years. And I'm in a different region, and I can say that some of those things that I have learned from that career fair that I volunteer for through in an interview and job evaluation simulation has been one of those things I can say leveraging on these days. Though I'm not a compound specialist, but the good thing is that recently I think I did my job evaluation training for evaluators recently, and I'm certified in
Okay.
that. And one of the reasons why I think I'm enjoying what I'm doing is because some of those learning that I've picked from Sheldon, and I think is one of those few people that I think that should be able to give us an insight when it comes to compound Ben. You can't mention compound Ben then you will not mention Shegun. And I'm not going to say that whatever we are going to be saying for the next 45 minutes thereabouts is not extensive. We can exhaust
Yeah.
this conversation. I know I've been under this training for about 2 days or so under Shegun and under different people. So even in that 2 days training, we can't exhaust this topic. So Shegun
Yeah.
going to give us an insight in different questions I'll be asking. And I know that either you are in career in HR, thinking of doing comp and ben, or you are going to be a generalist, I'm very much aware it's going to be very helpful for you. And if you're a businessman as an employee, as an employer, you will be able to also see what is the standard of what is obtainable. Please don't quote me. A disclaimer in your region because I also
Yeah.
know when it comes to comp and benefits are different per region. So depending on
Yeah.
what is obtainable, and also when it comes to sectors, industries, there's maybe slight different. So you apply what Check will be sharing or myself will be sharing today based on what is obtainable and acceptable in your region. So before I start my question, do you have one thing to say or say something about
Okay.
just a short notice?
Okay, Ayala, thank you so much for having me. I think I'll start from the part of the fact that we're in different regions. It's currently 1 p.m. where you are, and it's
Yeah.
7 p.m. where I am.
So,
So I think it's a global world, and it's also a small world as well. And having the opportunity to speak about a subject I'm passionate about, and not just speaking from it from the corner of where I was before, but now having a global understanding to talk about compensation and benefits. It's an honor to be here. I think it's also critical for me to mention that I am not the only compound band person,
yeah.
but maybe a bit more visible than others. And maybe I'm able to speak more about it and teach more about it, just to be able to help individuals to have better understanding. I think to a very large extent, that would stand me out. And I'm glad to talk about this subject today. So thank you for having me, Ayala.
Okay. Thank you, Sugar. And one thing that I'm going to start with is um, we are not yet to define compound then definition. We are not. That is
Okay.
not what we are. I know this can be a total reward when it comes to an employer perspective. But
Yeah.
one thing that I'm going to start with is what we say are the most important benefit to consider as an organization when we are doing new hires. And
Okay.
let me put it in context. So,
Okay.
as an organization, right? That's as an organization because you have been on both sides. You understand both sides. So, I also want you to
Yeah.
touch on as an employee. So, as an employee, as
Okay.
an employer, what we say are the most important benefit to consider when we are doing this compound blend strategy or trying to put it in paper.
Okay. Okay. So to be able to answer that very briefly, I know you had mentioned we are not defining, but
Yes,
it
yes.
also to add context to the conversation. Uh, I would start from the conversation of what we mean by total rewards,
Sure.
because benefit is a subsection of the total reward. So total reward has to do with everything an employee perceive as value coming from the employment relationship. That can be monetary and non-monetary. So benefit will
Mm.
fall under the non-monetary side of things. So the monetary side is the cash. That is the one that everybody can understand. It can be either fixed payment or variable payment that is tied to an achievement of a performance target or achievement to a company profit or
Mm.
whatever it is. It's called short-term incentive, long-term incentive. That's on one side. Now, on the benefit side, which is non-monetary, now, for an organization to be able to create the best and give the best, one, statutory requirement across regions is critical. If I was in Nigeria, the regulations will tell me there are some statutory benefit I must offer. If
Mm.
I am in the UK, there are some statutory benefit I must offer. If I'm in Ireland or Spain or I'm in Asia, there are some specific statutory requirements. So, from an organization standpoint, the very first benefit you must offer will be the statutory requirements. And across different regions, one of the critical ones that is critical is around health. So today, health insurance is becoming a statutory benefit across most regions or most geography that you operate on. And that health insurance can come in two forms. One is the government provided or the private provided, which means a form of health insurance that the organization pay for and the employee enjoys it. So a benefit is something the organization pays for, but the employee enjoys it. So that is why it is a benefit. If you are paying for it, that's not a benefit. That's one. Two is around uh, accident insurance, life insurance. They are becoming statutory because if I have an accident while at work, my organization must be able to cover for that. If on peradventure on an untimely death of an employee within an organization, the employee wants to be sure that the organization have my back. So statutorily government as making that as a compulsory. We call them workplace disability and the rest like that. Also, it's becoming more important that outside, when I've gotten to the age of retirement, I need to be able to fall back to something. So pension all around the world now is becoming statutory. Even for some region, it is auto-enrollment. Auto-enrollment in the sense that immediately you are in, after a period of 2 to 3 months, you must be enrolled. So it's not a function of I want to opt out or not. The organization must be able to do it. And that's also a very critical one. Now, those 3 broad areas seems to be, then the last area, which is also very critical, a 4th area, I'll put those statutory in 4 major areas. One is in the area of health, in the area of benefits, in terms of statutory requirements, health insurance, workplace accident, in terms of timely death, pensions. Then another critical one is holiday time off. Yeah. So statutorily, even according to labor laws all across the world, there's a certain limit of hours you must put in that you must take break. So time off work or paid time off work is now becoming a statutory benefit requirement. And that can go into your normal leave or annual leave or your maternity leave or your paternity leave. Those are becoming very, very critical for major areas. Now, the additional ones, which are not statutory, then I can now start to talk about a car allowance. Just to cover commute for some senior employees. Some of those ones, we call them fringe benefits. So it's an addition. So it's an organization going out of their way. Now, for some organization, they now add in dental insurance. The health insurance will cover the other areas, but dental now comes in as an additional. Now, in terms of maternity leave, for example, statutorily, it can be saying it is 16 weeks, but my organization can choose to say, no, we will do 20. At that point, I'm doing an extra. Those are some of the extras that tend to come up. Then meal allowance. I can choose to give you meal allowance. I can choose to even provide a canteen for you as an employee. Those are additions. Some organizations even do what we call discount code. So depending on the industry you're playing in, you might get a discount code to go and shop for free, and a certain percentage of I once worked for an organization whereby within it's a food related business that you get 75% discount when you shop within the canteen within the facility. So take, for example, buying something, you get a 75% discount. But if you purchase from other places, you can get as much as 25-50%. All of those are additional fringe benefits that an employee benefits from the organization. And when it comes to festive mood, then you can have the sharing of some things. I think that's very familiar to my people in West Africa. They need to share rice and a few things. Those are additional. They are not compulsory. If an organization does not do them, they are not breaking any law, as long as the statutory ones are taken care of. And to an employee as well, the employee now starts to make comparison. So how much leave days do I have? I know I need to have leave days. Some employee will now start to consider, you're giving me 5 days leave days annual or 12 days leave days. This organization is giving me 20. That other one is giving me 25. They now start to make comparison. Then employees will now start to ask questions around. So if I go for leave, is it paid sick leave or not paid? So it now starts to make comparison. I now start to ask questions around, so what's my health insurance covering as an employee? I say, no, I'm only covering yourself alone. An employee say, no, my former employer is covering myself and my family and my extended family. So then an employee will now start to make comparisons based on what they currently enjoy. Then the hours of work. Statutorily, there are minimum numbers of hours you must put in. Then some organization will say, no, you can only have 1 hour break. Some organizations say 30-minute break, and how it is taken. Then the employee now starts saying, no, I need work-life balance. I need remote work. I need to be in the office 2 days a week. Now that is becoming a negotiating power for the employee now. Some employees will even take time off to go and take care of their pets. time off to
Yeah.
take care of family, time to go for a voluntary or a charity work. So then it now start, because after post-COVID, organizations are now beginning to introduce benefits that would be able to create work-life balance. And even in some geographies, we'll now have what we call, you can buy holidays and you can sell holidays.
Yes.
So if you give me 10 days leave and I need 2 additional, I can buy it. And if you feel that giving you 10 is too much, I can sell it. And so all of those is now beginning. There is even some other benefit around gym membership. Where that now starts to, so now all of these things are more around organizations doing things that would now be able to balance the mental health of their employees and give a certain level of advantage to the employee. Some organizations run completely remote. After COVID, they've run completely remote, and that is their own selling point. They only come into the office once a time. So that now becomes, because I'm getting that from my employment relationship, it becomes like a value to me as an employee. So that gives different divide to the concept or the question.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. That was fantastic. And I think just to mention other things, because I know there's some benefit that are standard, while some are like extra. So something like a family-related leave, where somebody in your family is ill, instead of taking your normal vacation days, you can take
compassionate days.
Some are calling it compassionate leave. While we also have bereavement, instead of taking your leave to be able to attend the funeral, you can have up to about 5 to 7 days, depending on who the person that you lost determines the number
how
of days
close the person is to you.
Yes. So those are extra. And quickly, I think there's something you mentioned, which is, I think I was having conversations with some people sometimes back, and the person was like, why don't we pay 13th month? And I'm like, okay. And I think you mentioned that. So 13th month, I've seen organizations where instead of paying 13th month, they do bonus. So to save themselves from the stress of continuously paying 13th month, they do bonus maybe 1 in 3 years, and nobody's going to hold you. It's bonus. Bonus is just extra. It comes when there's more profit they want to share. But 13th month, even inculcated from the beginning of that contract, it becomes necessary for you to do. And I've seen also in my region, there's nothing like 13th month. You get your money.
Similar to where I am currently. There's nothing like 13th month.
So it doesn't make the organization a bad organization. It's just what they are used to. And that would take me to the next question, because my next question, you have already answered it, because is talking about around what attracts talent to an organization. I think you have mentioned all those things. So the next one is going to infuse this is, what compensation benefit have you found to be most effective and why?
Okay, so that question is region specific. And it can also be country specific. And I'll give you a typical example. This conversation happened just this last week. Do you know that in some countries in Europe, they are off 3 weeks during summer? They do not show in the office. They shut down completely during those 3 weeks. Now, if I was moving within Europe into the UK that does not have that practice, and I'm coming from Sweden, for example, or Denmark, for example, that have that practice, there's going to be a problem, because I want to take my 3 weeks off, but you're not going to give it to me, simply because that is a regulation in my own country. Also, the issue around 13th month or no 13th month is not statutory in itself. It's an addition. So that is why the issue around bonus comes in. Some organizations now have a regulated variable pay scheme, that I tend to stay to. So, to a very large extent, the country where you're existing determine what I will use to attract and what I'll use to retain my employees. So if I was an employer in the in the UK, for example, I know there is a lot around childcare. So I can give a childcare leave whereby 4-5 days in a week, one I give you off, you can work. You don't need to work. I will pay for it. That can be an attraction point for an employer in the UK. In Canada, for example, I can choose to introduce dental because everybody wants it. So rather than make it, let me say, conditional, I make it as an added advantage. Yeah. So take, for example, also in Spain, there is a very strong healthcare system that everybody believe they need to go to the government hospitals. Now, giving an addition as private health is almost like I'm giving more to them. Now, also in the UK, for example, cycle to work is critical if you are working in London, simply because they are promoting zero emission. So they now created a means whereby people drive less and they now take a bicycle to work. Now, what did the government do? The government now created a cycle to work scheme whereby you can purchase a bike for office commute. So there's a condition, and you would not pay a single tax on it. So that way you buy it, and they now have vendors that now give you the full money at the go. You buy it and you only repay the vendor, no extra interest, no taxation. Wow. Normally, if you're doing BIK, there's what we call BIK tax. So if the employer is providing health insurance for you as an employee in the UK, there's a BIK tax that you need to pay. If you have a car that is provided by the organization to you as a company car that you have, you need to pay BIK tax on that. In the case of cycle to work, the government has now made it easy for you to be able to not pay tax and have that. So that's an attraction in the UK. For example, in Belgium, when the government wanted to promote use of EVs and electric cars, they made it tax-free, such that for the next 3-4 years, you don't need to pay tax. So what did the organization do? Organization now started providing electric cars for their employees. Yeah. Now, what that now becomes an attraction point for employees that want to join employers in Belgium. Now, what am I trying to say in essence? Depending on the region that you are, the benefit you offer can be an attraction point. Then your mix of your fixed pay and variable pay can be very critical. So if I now look at variable pay and fixed pay is what I will get irrespective of whatever I put in. Yeah. Some organizations are now beginning to put in a variable pay scheme that is very strong, such that if I work, I can get as high as 30%, 50%, 100% of my salary, as long as I achieve a certain performance threshold and the organization also meets that threshold. Now, if I'm moving from an employer across geographies, even within the same region that does not offer that service, I can do what we call a buyback period. I can tell my new employer to buy my bonus out. So I'll now call it a sign-on bonus. So if I had a 150% that I will get if I stay there, and you need me immediately, the employee can now trade that in and say, sorry, you want me, then give me a sign-on bonus. And interestingly, that is also gradually happening. It happens at senior levels in Nigeria and in Africa, but now it's becoming commonplace in Europe now, because the organization wants to get you as a top talent and they want to buy you back. So some of those little tweaks across geographies can become a big talent attraction pool to say bonus scheme is beginning to pick up. Then there's also another element that I've noticed in this side that in Europe that is picking up very much is the conversation around long-term incentive plan. There is a very strong long-term incentive plan that gives employees for organizations that are listed on the London Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, and they are listed that they can become a part owner of the business. So you now have a very strong employee share option scheme that serves as a retention plan for the employee. So I give you X shares, X percentage of your salary, and for a certain vesting period for 3 to 5 years, such that it now begins to make employee to now stay longer. Simply because I will wait for 5 years, I get 30% of my salary in shares as part owner of the organization. And what that means is I can now tend to stay longer in the organization, and that becomes a strong retention tool for me. So the ability to be able to work around the total rewards framework can be a strong, we call it golden anchor, because for some organization, yes, but yes, for some organization, they now introduce a little twist to it to say, I know this had happened in Nigeria some time back. Not the best of principle is that you need to pay the organization back if you leave after a certain period. So, but the reality is that that's not a good practice. As I mentioned, it has happened before, but the practice itself is able to give an attraction tool that will keep your employee for a long period, and they'll be fine to work with you.
Okay, thank you. So there's something that I think I skipped, which I noted down, which is you mentioned BIK, and I just put it in the chat so that I don't forget. And before I could even ask you, somebody has answered it. So BIK is benefit in kind. So in case for people that might not be familiar with that, one thing that I noted down is learning and development, or learning and training. So do you say is a benefit, or is necessary, or is mandatory for an employer to provide that for employee?
Okay, so if we look at the total reward framework, there is a career development anchor part. And if we want to take career development as your learning and your development, it can be a source of attraction. So I know some organizations in Nigeria that for all of their senior managers, they send them to LBS. And because I'm going to go to LBS, it's not cheap to go to LBS. The connection I'm going to get when I go to LBS is not going to be cheap. And it means that becomes an attraction point. So if I look at it as a reward to the employee, it can fit under the career development framework under total rewards. Performance and recognition is also another element of how you encourage your employee as a performance for them, and you recognize them, can also be a means of reward to that employee. So yes, it can be a form of reward if it is done well, and it is not like a training bond whereby you must pay back. At that point,
you that from my mind. Okay.
The curve.
So, because I know I've done free consulting work, and I see back in Nigeria, I see that some organization will say that, okay, if we send you for a training, there's a training bond. And I always say it, that is an individual thing. So it's relative. You might think that I don't need to do a training bond, but some people might believe that training bond, they need it because eventually they will learn something, they will improve. But I've also realized that either you train your employee or you don't train them, they will still leave you.
Yeah, true.
So for me, from the few work that I've done in the past, it's always easier when you have a career plan, which we have training, either professional body, membership, payment, all those things. In my environment, we pay for if you belong to a particular body, either you're an accountant, HR,
Your professional
procurement,
body.
professional bodies, you pay for that your fee every year. And there's a conference, you go for the conference, it's paid for.
Yeah.
And in some area, you have to do all those things yourself. And
Yeah.
I'll say, I'm not going to say that I'm in support of training bond or not. I always tell people, do what you think is right for you. So if there's an opportunity for you to do training, because I've seen you mentioned Golden Antov. They like giving you this and trying
Yeah.
to hold your hand and say, bring it back. But it's a choice. It works for some people. And for some, that doesn't make that organization a bad organization. Because in the
True.
long
True.
run, they have also seen when they sent you abroad for a conference, for a 2 weeks training, and you came
Yeah.
back, you resigned.
Yeah.
That is not also not that's not fair to the employee. So if there is a training bond, it's your choice as an employee to be able to decide, I want to take this or I don't want to take it. And when you sign bond, read the condition properly. Read it over and over before you sign it off. Is it that some will tell you are going to pay back? Some will even tell you are going to stay for that year stipulated in that contract.
Yeah.
They are not paying back. You stay for 2 years. I mean, I always say it, if you think training bond is not for you, what
Then don't
say
go for it.
pay for the training yourself and move on. So that takes me to the next thing I'm going to be asking. Is about fairness. So the question is, what strategies do you use to ensure equity and fairness in compensation and benefit across an organization?
Okay. So equity and fairness. Starting point is equal pay for equal work done. And to be able to achieve that, we call it internal equity. And in able to achieve internal equity, you must do what we are. You must have a job grading system in place. And your job grading system is tied to your job evaluation. And your job evaluation is determining the relative worth of the jobs, such that I am carrying 10 buckets, you're carrying 10 buckets. We should be paid the same way. Equal pay for equal work done. It becomes unfair if I'm carrying 10 buckets and you're also carrying 10 buckets, but you're earning twice as myself. At that point, it starts to go into the unfairness territory. Irrespective of that, there is also the ability to understand that people would do different job at different level of competency. So in order to achieve that, then you now create a pay structure that tends to define the level of performance or the level of competency in that role, such that there's an entry salary, a mid-level salary, and an upper limit of salary, meaning we are doing the same job, but I'm doing it, I'm more competent than you are, more experienced than you are. Giving a structure in place to pay extra for that person is also being equitable and being fair. Rather than leaving it to chance to say, I like your face, I'll give you 2 times. I don't like your face, I'll give you -1. Once you have a job grading system in place, tied to a pay structure, and also creating room for promotion, identifying your critical talent, more around creating that reward framework, such that the decisions you are making is not an owner-run organization. Chairman wakes up this morning, he likes my face, I get a pay rise. Chairman wakes up and does not like the clothes I'm wearing, I get demoted. Now, if we're able to create structures that are interested in internal equity and external competitiveness, then you are in the framework of being equitable, being fair within the organization. Aside that, then if it's open to subjection or my thought or how I feel, then I will say it's a bit not equitable and unfair.
That's fantastic. I could recall when you said Chairman wakes up today and he likes you I know I've told you before, but I will say that here. I know it's difficult conversation to have. Sometimes the human resource space can be very. I'm looking for a right word. Can be very demanding. Let me use the word demanding because sometimes you are in between employee and employer. So it's like you're now
Yeah,
standing alone. You can't even say you are the employer. You can't even say you are the employee because now the employee is like against you, where also the
exactly.
employer is also looking like they're against you, thinking that it's your fault. Whereas it is not your decision. And one thing that I've learned over the years, I will only say that, you know what, I'm only doing my job. I'm not, I
Yeah,
didn't do anything wrong. So sometimes you might want to feel that I've seen a situation where the chairman said, Ayola, oh, this person is this, yes. Oh, can we do this? Put him on this scale. And I'm like, okay, sometimes it's an impromptu decision based on
yeah,
emotion. And
yeah.
and I've seen
And
that.
that's only
Go
possible
ahead.
because there is no system guiding the
Thank
decision.
you. Thank you. So it's because you like we also know that sometimes maybe the chairman or the managing director is the chief HR. Agree. But that doesn't make it give you that power to just change what is obtainable, what we have as a
Yeah,
structure and system. And that is why it's
yeah,
always easier and life makes it easy and going forward to have a proper
yeah,
structure. So when you have a structure, nobody will can wake up and say, "Oh, being the MD or being the chairman of this organization, this is what we are doing." It never worked that way. So that would take me
exactly.
to the next thing I'm going to ask. So how do we implement and drive compliance with cross-functional teams or stakeholders on a major compensation and benefit change? I know you have been in that space time and again. So
Okay.
how do we?
So compliance is very critical. Compliance means you have set what the standard is, and they are checking if it meets what the standard is. Now, in a typical organization where the HR department is working well and the comp and ben department or unit is working well as well, there are regular checks around what we call the compa ratio. Compa ratio has to do with how much each employee is earning with respect to the midpoint of the pay structure that have been defined. Now, what that helps us to know within the system is to know whether people are earning far away from what we expect them to earn or they are earning lower. So, on a monthly basis, organizations usually run a compliance check on their pay structure. And they also run compliance check on the job grading as well. If we have said that employees that are coming in as a manager must come in as a grade C, for example, we go on a monthly basis to find out where is all the new managers coming in at and at what salary are they coming in. What that helps us to do from an HR perspective is to be sure that we are compliant with what we have defined we want to do. Now, compliance becomes difficult if we have not set that standard of saying for each employee coming in at this level, we need to give this amount of salary for them. And if a new role is created that was not existing before, there is a process to do an evaluation of that job and fit within the structure and fit within the salary it is expected to have. Because what that helps us to do is to run compliance check. That same compliance check can be run against our reward policy. So what's our policy for promotion? If we have said that for an employee to get promoted, they must have X grade in their performance evaluation over X period of time. And when they are being promoted, they must be given X percentage increase or X movement in the notches from wherever they are. Your compliance check now goes in to find out this individual got a promotion. Is the performance criteria achieved? You tick yes or no. What is the increase that was given? Is it a 50% increase as against 20% increase? That is what your compliance check is going to come up with. But if you've not run it into a procedure or what we call business as usual, so at the point of implementing across the cross function, you need to define what the criteria is. Most of the time, the problem happens when the HR department or the reward team is not in control of the increases, or the internal teams is not understanding what the policy of salary increase or promotion is. Then it tends to be a problem. But if there's an understanding, they will put in compliance check of checking against the policy on a periodic level as a business as usual. It should be monthly, it should be quarterly. You don't wait till when there's a problem before you realize that you need to correct it. So if you do a monthly check, you can easily flag the issues. And some of the times, what we do is that if the individual gets more than is expected, there is a level of approvals that is put in the system. So if the policy says that the increase I can have as an employee, as a new employee, is X percentage of the midpoint salary, maybe 80% compare ratio. Now, if I'm coming in and I'm as an employee and I'm asking for 150%, as the line manager or the recruiting manager, I cannot approve 150% except it goes to an higher level officer within the organization. Now, if all of that has been put in place, those are compliance steps that must be met, and it will reduce the anomalies. But we put it into the system to say, if anybody is recruited and this percentage is more than what it should be, the system should not accept it. So if you're using an HR system to manage that, aside the policy compliance part, you put the compliance into the HR system when it comes to compensation approval and compensation module of the HR system to also check each of those steps. That's where you can be sure that across the functions, not only in HR, because most of the time what I notice is that the HR team is the first people to convince that there's a compliance, then the line manager, then the different departments. Because sometimes HR just feel that, I know now we have money, you can give this person the 50% is asking for. Not knowing that giving a 50% increase in terms of monetary value may not be much, but when we compare, okay, you're doing a salary increase system, you will recognize what I'm about to say. We've been in one before, and I choose to give somebody 50%. That 50% may just be 8,000. Another person gets 20%. That person's 20% might be 8,200. When people start to talk about that increase, they don't talk about the value. They talk about the percentage, because that is the one that favors them. The fact that I got 20% and my own value is 1,200 and you got 50%, your own value is 1,000, I will not talk about the value. I'll talk about the percentage increase given. And in natural sense, that is not being equitable. But if I maintain and say we can only give maximum of 50% increase, then everybody knows that anything above that amount would need to be approved, and the approval step that are given. So that way, there's a compliance check on a monthly basis. Even within our day-to-day system, there's a compliance that were built into that system such that it flags all of the anomalies. And that is actually a better way to do it rather than leaving it to chance.
Yes, you are very right, because I think I'm trying to read some questions and comments from the chat.
Good.
Somebody said training bond does not hold waters in Nigeria, and I'm like, I was in my mind, I'm like, that might be true, but employers still do it. So they still do it, and I will say that is a wrong thing to do. That is why I'm speaking from the perspective of an individual, not an HR person. That was why I mentioned is your choice as an employee to accept or not. So, but my thought is forcing it on people is what I'm not going to buy. I'm not going to accept. So I agree with, I think Adewumi said that, Ezekiel. If you have seen, I've been privileged to work as a consultant, and I've seen or I've heard a lot of things, either as an internal or external consultant. So training bond is still, I don't want to mention any organization. Like the back of my mind, I have a lot. Big top organizations, like you said, in Nigeria, they do it. But it's your choice as an individual not or to accept such. And somebody also asked, awesome conversation. Can we have the formula to what you just spoke about? So I've asked the person formula to what exactly, so that we can know what the person is asking for. So the next question I'm going to ask is what, now this is like a personal question. What defining moments were instrumental in shaping your professional trajectory and career path? Hold on, hold your thought. The reason why I'm asking this is, I would say it, if people don't know, Sheffield is not an human resource professional by study. I would say it's a self-taught. And one thing I've learned over the years from different people, I'm also a self-taught. I'm not a human resource by study. It's a self-taught, did different training, work experience, learn from different people that are there that studied it. So that's why I'm asking this question, so that for people that are trying to probably give up on their career in HR or trying to start in HR, it will help them to be able to understand the defining moment that was instrumental in shaping your professional trajectory and your career path.
Okay. I think without if I want to really do justice to this question, I would say it was my very first job. Now, I read chemical engineering, and somewhere within the university system, one day I was seated while my friends were talking about the oil rig, going to manufacturing outfits, the mass transfers, and the thermodynamics. Something just struck me one of those days, and I just said, I was telling because I had a detour. I went to the Polytechnic before going to the university. I had a detour, and I was talking to one of my friends, my best graduating student at that time, and I said, I don't see myself in the oil rig or in the manufacturing outfit. They look at me and say, are you okay after spending all these years? I said, because I don't see myself. And the day I embraced the ability to leave the oil rig for the human rig, because I noticed I was more drawn to the humanity side. I was more drawn to the explaining the complex stuff in a simple way. And I noticed I was drawn to writing CVs even before I left the university. I was helping people to craft CVs. I was crafting for myself. I was reading about, I was really more interesting. I was drawn to the explaining some of the things I do today, facilitating and the rest. And I said, what will give an HR graduate a step in the door? And that's how I found consulting. And I had an unsolicited CV, unsolicited application to a consulting outfit in Nigeria, eManage. I owe it to Folari Lunge. That's my managing director. And I also owe it to Phil Maduagu. Now, these are individuals that shaped or that gave me an opportunity. I submitted an unsolicited CV, and I noticed I dropped it on a Wednesday, and by Friday they called me I should come for an interview, and I was wondering, who are these guys? And I had my first session with Phil, and she was asking me, so what made you write it? I said, I'm interested in HR. And I put all the volunteers that I've done, the youth work I've done in church, the ones I did in university, I put everything together into a manpower kind of CV. And I remember having my session with my MD, and he said, I think you have the 50% it takes to operate as an HR person, because you need a lot of analytical skill. So HR is not all about liking people. Because I was coming from a consulting background, I've seen the likes of KPMG, Deloitte building consultants out of nobody that never read accounting. So that was exactly what I wanted to do for HR. And I think I found a good ground. I would say that my very first work experience grounded me in what I do today. I remember 6 months down the line, starting my first job, and I was drafted into my very first remuneration survey. That was, I'm not exaggerating, 2010/2011. That's more than 15 years now. I did my very first remuneration survey. I'm saying it with all sense of modesty. I never knew what a remuneration survey was. My MD just said, Segun, Shebi, you read chemical engineering, you should be good with Excel. He didn't ask me if I was good. He said, you should be good with Excel. You will crunch the numbers for us. And I came in and he gave me a very big book on compensation and benefit, dropped it on my lap, and I self-taught myself every single thing. My very first remuneration survey, I was doing what I was asked to do because I didn't understand what it was. But by the time I was doing the second one in that same organization, and by the time I left that first organization, I was doing the third one. And I can remember my managing director telling me that, Segun, you're very fortunate. We hardly don't have remuneration surveys, but you're already working on your third one in your second year of working with us. And that was a moment I never forget because they say the rest is history. And from there on, while I was trying to specialize in HR, I just said, I think I'm going to specialize in this area. I have analytical skills. Everybody runs away from mathematics. They run away from the calculation side of HR. Let me run towards it because I can build a niche on it. And I think for me, it was a function of me understanding what my strength was and using my strength and playing to my strength within the HR field. And today, with a lot of experience and with a lot of opportunity, I think I've been fortunate enough to work on a couple of projects that tends to give me the experience that I have today. And I think I still owe it to that very first job.
Okay, thank you so much, Segun. So somebody asked this question, says, okay, you say, what will you say, leave and bonus, are they statutory? Leave bonus.
Leave.
Yes. Leave
No.
is not.
No. As a matter of fact, it is the leave itself. It is the annual leave that is statutory. Whatever you are paid for, it is not statutory. And I can tell you, working across geographies, working in Nigeria and currently in Europe, there's holiday pay is almost as paid leave. So we're paying you for the day you are working. We're not giving you anything extra. Honestly, that was one of the first shock I had. I was expecting
work done.
The only time you can get paid holiday pay outside of Africa is when you resign and you still have accrued leave days that you have not used. Then they can convert it to money. But aside that, the day you are working, you get paid for that day. So leave allowance is a concept that operates more in Nigeria and some other African countries. It's not backed up by law per se. It is the leave that is most geography that is statutory. The leave allowance is not. So it has become an industry standard in Nigeria. So you can't owe it. If they don't give it, you can't really owe them. But because it's industry standard, others are doing it. Organizations now tend to do it because as an employer, can I use it as a bargaining power?
So for me, I know that it's totally different also in a region where you are accrued in leave days. Like working for about between, let's say, 25 days, you have a number of hours. So by the time you check back, maybe by the time you work for 12 months, you have about 20 or 25 vacation days.
Accrued days, yeah.
Accrued days. Not that they just say, oh, you have 10 days of the way you call it leave in Nigeria, and then you get paid for leave allowance. It doesn't work. So it's shocking sometimes when you find yourself in an environment you only get paid for work done. Not because that was why you mentioned earlier that there are some areas, organization where you have compassionate leave so that you can attend to a lot of short 1 or 2 days. you have bereavement leave, you can attend funeral of family or close friend. Those things
Yeah.
are inculcated because nobody quote and unquote will pay you for. There's what we call sick leave with pay and sick leave without pay.
Yeah.
So it gets to a time that when you exhaust your accrued sick leave, you are not being paid for sick, even when you are sick. Yes, but he's sick leave without pay. And if he's taking a longer time, it gets to what we call probably long or short LTD,
Long-term
long-term disability.
yeah,
Disability. So
sickness. Yeah.
it's not just that, oh, it's a must they pay you leave allowance. Check what is obtainable in that area. And there's a
And it's
cost
even
to
very
somebody.
funny that you just mentioned the long-term disability you just mentioned. For some region, individuals can go close to 1 year or
2 years.
more
Yeah.
still being paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because statutorily, by law, they are backed. They can be kept there for as long as they want. So it can be very. But in some other regions, such does not exist. I think Nigeria, the highest you can do is after 90 days.
90 days, and it's up.
After 90 days, you can actually, you start to reduce the payment. Then after it goes beyond that, you can choose to terminate. After about 6 months thereabouts, you can terminate completely. So that's the best you can have. But some other regions can go a year or more. You're still on long-term disability.
I saw a question around training bond. Somebody said, okay, if you refuse to sign the training bond, sometimes the employer terminates or something like that. And the person was like, what alternative do you give? So for me, if you are afraid, go ahead.
So now, so that question, if I want to operate like a Nigerian, my response will be different from the way I operate now.
Yes.
But the reality is also very critical that you need to know that as an employee, the power is in your hand.
Yes, please.
Gone are the days when we feel that, okay, there's a level you get to that you can refuse some things from employers. It's only when you're growing in your career you feel you can't say no because you feel the employer has an upper hand. Actually, they cannot terminate your employment because you refuse a training bond. The best they can do, as a matter of fact, if you can document it that you were sacked because it is tied to a training bond, you have a case in industrial court.
Yes, please.
Don't be afraid. Just make sure you are not disobeying.
Some of
the time it can be out of rebellion. I think you should weigh your options. If I go for this training bond, what is my options? If I don't, what is my option? Most of the time, people are afraid to sign some things because they know they are going to break it before they signed it.
That's true. That's profound. Yes, please.
So if I'm not breaking it, so why am I afraid? I'll do the time and I'll move on. Or I can get another employer to pay for it.
Yes, please.
Because some senior employees are doing that.
Yeah.
Some senior employees I've signed a couple like that the new employer has to be the one paying for my employer. Yeah.
So just to confirm,
but it must be very good for that to happen anyway.
To the last question, I want us to be out of here in 1 minute. Fact, the last question. Somebody asked in the group, please, what is the name of the book on compensation and benefit that your MD gave you?
I will need to look for that book. It's been a while. I'll need to look for it. Yeah, I'll need to look for it.
That link. And my last question is in 30 seconds. What will you advise anyone trying to specialize in comp and ben or in HR?
It's a long journey. You are not going to be as good as the person you look up to in a short training. Most of the challenge I have is, yes, the trainings are good. It gives you the foundation, but you also need to put in the work. And putting in the work is also finding opportunities within your organization to practice what you've been taught. Not everybody will have the opportunity to do everything. I've been thinking about this, and maybe because this conversation is coming up, I'm not going to commit myself yet until when I'm able to put a structure around it. And that's the structure around post the training. How can I practice what I've been taught? Maybe we can put heads together and do something later.
You can connect on that side. So thank you so much, Segun. This is I'm privileged to have you on this session. I will say thank you I know that we can't exhaust this even in one day. This is priceless. Thank you so much for your time. And for everyone that joined across different platforms, thank you. Definitely, you were able to see this video on LinkedIn, on my YouTube page, or on Instagram, either Shegun or mine. You should be able to see this. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day till we meet next time. Have a
Yeah, and
wonderful day.
yeah, thank you. Let them connect with us on LinkedIn as well.
So, and let me say that if you want to check Shegun on Udemy. He has different courses that you can learn from. Some are paid for and some are free. You will thank me later. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.